Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Um, Welcome
Hello.
to another Saturday morning start event. Let's start the event. All right. Um, okay, so this week I'm sort of in the middle of some things right now. First up, we've got some more screenshots from Klepto and his water in progress. This is looking more tropical. Very cool. Here's a screenshot I posted yesterday using some models that I'm working with. This is a package from Unity, and I was able to load the prefabs and the scene in. There's some interesting things. It's tricky to get sort of the not exactly tone mapping, but the exposure and to get the coloration right. But I think I know what I need to do next. Um, let's see. Yeah, here's a prefab that was loaded from the Unity prefab and then saved as an Ultra prefab. There's some weird things there, but I think I'm able to get all of these things imported successfully, which is very cool. Um, yeah, that's the
Oh,
imported
are,
scene.
are these are these from like the Unity shop or
Yeah,
like
I
a
am just
supplier? Yeah.
been talking to the author of this, and he said it was okay to try this out. The green objects are where there's an inverted scale. I kind of if I detect a negative axis on one of the a negative scale for one of the axes, then I marked it green so I can go back and change it because we don't support negative axes because I don't think it's a good idea. Um, one thing I found is we need to be able to easily access. I'm going to be all over the place today. Um, okay, so I just uploaded some command line tools. New version of the Kronos IBL sampler. This is how you make PBR skyboxes. And
Right.
this is just what this does is it converts the HDR into the KTX2, and then it extracts all the bitmaps in the KTX2 into raw files. And right before this meeting, I was writing a Lua script extension to use this, and then I've got it working from the editor where you select an HDR and it processes it, and then the very last step that I'm going to do after the meeting is take those raw images and then pack them into DDS into a single DDS file. And so the end result is going to be you just go up uh, to a menu in the editor, and there's a menu item to do it. You select your HDR, and it outputs ready to use DDS files. Um,
So this will replace Copter's old tool of
yes,
loading in. Yeah.
yeah,
Like that stopped working for me too. I
yeah.
was
Same
kind of
here.
bummed out. So I take it this is going to be like a paid for asset library that you're going to be integrating for people with licenses to use in their projects.
The PBR thing, the HDR thing. No,
Yeah.
no, it's just part of the engine.
It's an extension. You just load it, like you just put it in your scripts folder and it just works.
Yeah, like our
Nice.
implementation of OpenAI. This is just done as
Yeah.
an extension. You can just add new
Yeah.
features to the editor. I've been writing code this morning, so I'm like having trouble talking. Um,
I've been awake for another 30 hours,
hmm,
so if I seem a little off myself in my questions, that's why.
that'll do it.
Don't worry about it.
Um, yeah, so that will be working probably like an hour after we finish this meeting, and then you'll be able to get HDRs into the engine much more easily to use them at skyboxes because I like to use like I think my default. Let's see,
Mm.
I like stormy, overcast stuff with
Oh,
really
I like
dramatic clouds like
I
this.
like what I like bright, beautiful, like beautiful mornings.
Well, the problem, these look very cool, but the problem is when you compress this down to the diffuse reflection, you get
You're gonna get a lot of dithering, right? And weird banding, looks like.
that might just be maybe the video is compressed. There shouldn't be any apparent banding
That
on
might be
this.
my
Um, let's see. But there's not a lot of color in this sky. It's pretty much, the reflection is pretty much gray. Let's disable the directional light. Yeah, it's just kind of gray blue. Um, and the blue isn't very strong, so I think I want the default to be something like more bright blue with orange on the horizon, so the sides of objects are sort of orangish. I don't know. I think uh, I think it'll do very well with stuff like this because just like the grayish, the solid gray reflection isn't really doing it for me. Anyways, um, let's see. Yeah, so preparing this scene in Ultra, it's always nice to be working with real 3D models. Um, so that's what I've been doing most of the week. We also about at least 15 solved May 18th. When was the last meeting? May 18th. So Sunday, 15, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 19 bug reports were resolved last week. Most of it was just done like Sunday in one day. Um,
Yeah, it's the little things that kill us.
well, that's why they get fixed. Um,
Yeah.
okay, that's all for the engine that I have to talk about this week. Really, I'm just in the middle of a bunch of stuff. Before I move on, any questions or anything about that?
With the canyon stuff, those are models, right? And you have to like do the whole shimmy of like placing the models in the scene to make it look good. Because I know you're not a fan of manual work, and
What what's the question?
like this canyon stuff, these are all like models, right? So you have to individually place them, or are they part of the vegetation system?
Um, yeah, I would place like if you're using stuff like this, I wouldn't use the vegetation system for this.
Right.
I would use the vegetation system for like small rocks on the ground and some plants
All
and
right.
stuff. Um,
the vegetation system. Reap was trying to explain it to me. Can you clarify what is that like a new system that you've added, or like what is it exactly?
yeah. So
Oh yeah.
Leadworks had a very cool system for trees and grass and stuff, where you can paint them onto the terrain, and it did something kind of special. It places everything procedurally, so it doesn't store anything in memory, and so
Wait, so how is that like an octree, or how does that work? Like,
it's a grid, and then it procedurally like it lays out a grid, and it procedurally like figures out like the randomness for each instance.
just fills it in between. Okay.
And when you do that, it uses 500 times less memory. And so for a small terrain, it doesn't really matter. But if you're doing like something very large, like in the future, let's see. if we had a 16384 by 16384 terrain times 64 bytes, and we had one instance every meter and 64 bytes per instance. Okay, how many kilobytes is that? That many kilobytes. How many megabytes is that? How many gigabytes is that? Okay, so that's 16 gigs of memory.
I was gonna say it's not too bad actually for that kind of generation, because when I used to work with octrees and stuff, it's the same kind of thing. You're just breaking it down into a LOD scale and all that. So. I wonder, wait, do you have with the vegetation system? Because I'm seeing what you're showing. Is there an integrated like LOD system where like from the distance that you're going, you do have that? Okay.
So the let's see. Game Engine Gems 3. That system was actually, I wrote about that in this book, Game Engine Gems 3. And it's on sale by Eric Langle, the guy from C4. He's actually a professor at UC Santa Cruz now. Yep. Yeah, I wrote that chapter, and it talks about the system. In Leadworks, I used a geometry shader to generate the instances. In Ultra, I used a compute shader. And one thing problem we had in Leadworks was we had one model per layer, and you could paint across the terrain and place that model. But if you had like multiple kinds of trees and different things, then it was the different layers don't see each other, and so it was a lot of work to prevent two objects from appearing on top of each other, especially when you're not placing all of these by hand. You're just dragging a brush and they appear. In Ultra, we have, I think both in Leadworks and Ultra, we had LODs for these, but we also have variations in Ultra, which is very, very cool. And that's why you have different trees here. And so when you draw the trees across the landscape, then it just automatically selects a variation to place there. And so you get a lot of nice variety without any effort.
So that's basically what, like a defined like seed that you put into whatever you're building with it, and then the engine just fills it in.
Yeah. So all these rocks are on the same layer, and I just painted the layer on here, and all these little rocks it just randomly chooses a different one.
But you can still paint, like in other engines, you can still paint the trees on the terrain, so it's not filled by default.
So in the bottom right there, there's in the thing, that right there, that looks like almost like you've got like shrubbery or something, like a farm almost, like planted things. So there's the system outside of like trees and all that, the vegetation, you can expand that, I assume, into anything you want with vegetation.
Well, yeah, anything that you have a lot of instances and you don't want to deal with manually positioning each one.
I use it in my game I make a kind of post-apocalyptic survival game, and I use it, for example, to place trash bags on the ground in the streets and some other trash to make an evident.
So this makes more sense now from what Reap was telling me. So this system can actually be applied for any sort of clutter, any sort of objects within the terrain. Yeah. Cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it'll support very, very large numbers without having to store that in memory and load that into from the disk and stuff. So
So in some of these really dense kind of scenes, I assume that the performance is exceptionally good, like 60 FPS or 120 FPS without much issue.
It should be good. The bottleneck tends to be the Vertex pipeline, so you can still
I was
you can overload it.
that was my
You can
next
overload
question
it.
was like what's being loaded into memory on top of like the vertex shading and everything else going on there, but I guess you answered that.
The calling is like instantaneous. Like
Nice.
it takes like it takes no time at all to call like thousands, like hundreds of thousands of instances. That's super super fast. In fact, I like the results from this so much that I'm actually going to replace our. Right now, we do calling on a separate CPU thread, and so it makes kind of a round trip and comes back to the rendering thread with the results. And I like this so much that I'm going to move all the calling onto the GPU into a compute shader.
You answered like two of the questions I was about to ask. I was going to say if you're doing this on the CPU, when I've done this before on other engines, it's pretty heavy. So nice. That's actually impressive. That's beautiful, dude. Great job.
Also really nice is that you can interact with the terrain now. So you can, hide and show instances.
Entries and such.
Yeah, we were talking about this I think last week. Like there is an API so you can like, okay, so like I'm standing here and I want to, you can get all the instances that appear in an area, you know, given a bounding box, and then you can hide and show each instance. Like all the instances exist all the time. It's just some of them are hidden, and so you can at any time you could like delete, you could remove one of these and replace it with a 3D model, and then you can make like, you know, if you want to make a bush that waves around when you walk through it, and it's not a shader effect, it's like a soft body simulation or something, or if you want to make a tree that falls over, then you can swap this instance out with a regular 3D model. So yeah, now I'm just trying to
I
get
guess-
better 3D. I'm just trying to get better artwork to actually use with the system.
So there's a quick, like, I don't know how complex this question would be, but like when you were showing some of those rock models, and from what you just described, where you can make like an instance within the level, does it allow for like if you were to get one of those assets and you put it in, could you define in the editor like a behavior for it, or do you have to do that outside of like the editor that you're showing? If I wanted, like, let's say one of those rocks to crumble, would I have to do that outside, or could I define that within the engine and the editor?
Well, I mean, if you have a script for it, then you would just attach that script to the object in the editor.
Cool.
Does that answer your
It
question?
makes sense. Yeah, no, that makes yeah. I'm impressed. You've done an amazing job with this stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, it's time.
It's been
it's
a
time
while
to
since
start
I've been
showing
here.
off.
It looks fantastic. Like, and all this is just insane to me. It's cool that you've done this.
Let's get in there. So 096 is that's when the foliage system is out right now on the beta branch, but it's still being tested. Version 0.96, the big feature there is going to be the foliage system. I think this next Steam sale available is going to be in about 3 weeks, so it'll probably the release will probably happen then. And this is really the first. It's still early access, but this is the first version where I really want to start showing off the graphics because, yeah, I think it's time.
Rooms.
Huh?
More impressive than box rooms.
and a lot of like, I really dislike working with programmer art. That's why, like, with the example game, I'm like, I don't even want to write any code until we have like some of the models that we need. Because you learn so much from this. Like I figured out from this a couple of things. I implemented some auto exposure yesterday, the like iris adjustment thing, and then I think we need detail normal maps because some of these are all 4096 textures, but they're stretched over a lot of surface.
Yeah, and it kind of looks like it has that like wet, like muddy CGI look.
You should think about for models like this for this UDEMS. We talked, I think, a few weeks about it,
That Blender thing.
where you have actually, it's not Blender. It's more a thing like which modern engines always use. They call it UDEMS, so
Yeah, that was.
you
That
can
doesn't.
spread you can spread the UV maps over multiple texture maps for a single model.
Well, I mean, you're just rearranging the pixel data. You're not. I mean, that doesn't increase the resolution.
I mean, for the detail,
As
one
I
of the things
understand
I've
it.
done, one of the things I've done for those kinds of scenes to make it look less flat is just like a simple monocular like Q pass or something, and you could easily add in depth data. But I know what you mean when you're talking about like the normal maps and all that. I'm interested. I don't know. I'm gonna think about the question I'm gonna ask because you might answer it because you're covering some things on this.
I think this is just an array texture, and they're rearranging. I mean, it's probably convenient to work with like one square at a time, but it's. I mean, it doesn't increase the texture resolution.
No, the single resolution not, but you can create bigger models with.
I don't think
yeah.
that's true. Actually, I don't think it does because I mean, it's not going to increase. It doesn't magically like increase your GPU memory. Yeah, I mean, it's just.
Have you
textures.
something I was asking Reap about, and I don't think he was very sure of. So if I wanted to import, say, like a Nanite project from Unreal 5, is there like a very simple answer you could tell me? Like, would I just have to break it down into like an array or simplify the model? Or like, what would I do if I were to bring in one of those really complex like model sets that I want to play with?
We don't support mesh shaders, which is what
Okay.
Nanite is.
That's why I'm saying I take it I'd have to like simplify it and bring it through like Blender or something and then re-import it as like a simplified model.
Yeah, I mean these are actually photometric models. These are actually like pretty surprisingly low poly. Each of these rocks is like maybe 2 or 3,000 polygons. But yeah, we might do that in the future, but right now it's just not a supported feature.
Yeah,
So you
I
said
mean,
2 or 3,000 polygons. So is there like a limit for the number of faces that a model can have? Because some of the models I have that I've talked with Reap about that I have a project I'm considering moving into Ultra Engine, and some of the files I have are like 50 million, 150 million faces kind of thing. Would that be an issue?
Probably it depends on your hardware. There's no upper limit on. I mean, yeah, there's no upper limit on the number of vertices. It's just like what your hardware can process. I mean, what Unreal Engine is doing, it's basically an LOD system on like a.
It's breaking it down into little sections. I have a lot of scripts and stuff for that for some of my models, and I as I found out from you now that this would be just basically a simplification of the mesh and then just re-import it. But I was just curious because it's like my hardware is still way above the average person, and it's interesting to see the way that you've optimized the engine, and I'm just kind of trying to figure it out still. So
Yeah.
I apologize if I'm asking stupid questions on this.
No, there are no stupid questions. Let's see. So this library, it has. I think they're actually developing. They're basically breaking meshes down into meshlets. So I mean, in the future, that's something that, yeah, here it is. We're likely to support, but I really see that. I see that stuff as a tool. I don't. I mean, I think it's. I don't really see us using like million polygon boxes for everything in the future. And if you read, I mean, from what I've read of, from people who are using that kind of thing, it has a lot of limitations.
There's no physics calculations for a lot of the models I have because you can't deform them in a reasonable amount of time or anything. It's an issue with Unreal that they're still trying to figure out. You have to be pre-computed and pre-scripted, and it's a nightmare to work with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like a ton of value of having just having more polygons per se. Like, it's kind of a cool technical thing, but no, I don't think it has changed everything. Um, so I wanted to point out we were talking about Vulkan and OpenGL earlier, and I wanted to point out so here on PCGamingWiki.com, 3 games using Vulkan so far. Again, I don't know what the criteria for games making it on this list is, but
Dark Forces Remaster is just a layer. It's not actually Vulkan directly. It's a layer where they redid it.
Nobody
that's
uses
not
Vulkan
nobody.
directly.
Yeah, that's what Reap and I were talking about.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 using OpenGL. You're probably, I would guess, probably 100 using DirectX 11, maybe. Let's actually take a look at DX11 and DX12 too.
Are people still publishing games today under DX11?
DX11 is the number
DX11.
one. It's the number 1 most popular graphics API.
I've been out of the loop on that one for a while. I figured that was like defunct at this point. Wow.
No, I mean DX12 has also failed to some extent. I mean, last I checked, I think the numbers were like almost 50-50 in 2023. So what is that, like? Let's say 15, 25. I'm going to say 30 maybe.
I'm curious, as someone who is in this, let me ask you, why would the focus still be on DirectX 11? Is it just hardware access, or is it the API is just more functional and has better performance, or?
Because DirectX 12 is like needlessly complicated.
Like Vulkan.
The only thing I use DirectX 12 for, as I said, is an Unreal 5, and I don't really deal with it. I've been dealing with OpenGL and Vulkan mostly, so.
Yeah, it looks like they're pretty close. I don't know I didn't count exactly, but it was like a page and a half for both of them, I think.
Crazy. I didn't even know that's how it was.
Yep. Yeah, the number of it used to be for like DX10 and OpenGL. OpenGL had like 60% as many games as DX10, I think. This was around like 2015, 2016. And now Vulkan is just like, I mean, it's like 1%, less than 5% as many games as DX. So, yeah, Vulkan is a failure. We need to recognize that and move on.
I just want to make a joke there and say, yeah, you and I have talked about that plenty, and I agree with your decision on moving back to OpenGL and not dealing with the nonsense. So
yeah, yeah. Now that I'm back on something that's I'm making quite
Reap
a lot
said
of progress.
Reap said you moved to what, OpenGL 4.6, like the latest version, or?
Yeah. The only thing that 4.6 adds is Spire V support.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. From what I've seen some differences in behavior with some shaders. At least on my AMD 6600, I've seen differences between the Spire V and the original source code. So I'm only using it for one to compile one compute shader. Everything else, I just use the original. I just use the raw shader source files, and having worked both ways, I think just using shader source code is better. It's much better because I can just like edit a post processing effect and save it in the code editor, and instantly the editor just instantly detects it, and I instantly see the results. Whereas with Spire V, you have to like click on a bat file or something in order to compile it. There's just like an extra step, and if you have a problem with Spire V, it's like this opaque intermediate step. You can't really describe it. You can't. Yeah, it's just you can't.
I've only used that for vertices, translations, and some other nonsense. I don't like it. So I understand.
Yeah, I mean, it has some advantages. It is nice that if the Spire V, that you never have to worry about a shader not compiling, but if you just develop on an AMD card, you also never have to worry about a shader not compiling. I mean, in other words, if it compiles on AMD, it'll compile on NVIDIA. Not because there's anything wrong with AMD's compiler, but just because they tend to stick to the specification more strictly.
I was about to say, where you were like, oh, it'll compile on NVIDIA. Not always. I've run into some colorful issues in the past with that.
Well, 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, that's more it's more appropriate.
Okay, so let's see. Okay, let's see if there's done. I was about to.
Yeah.
We were just talking about you,
Question. Yeah.
Marcel. Is he in here?
No, I told him we were in chat.
Oh,
So
okay.
he said okay. He said, "Oh, it's that day."
Oh, he hasn't joined yet.
Let's see.
I would wait for a second. Yeah. So Josh, I was like, I've talked with Reap about this. I have some projects in mind. Like I have some things I want to migrate, and I really am starting to find that I despise working in the Unreal Engine 5 environment. I liked 4. There were certain things that were simpler, and I've been testing the waters. Now I don't have an Ultra Engine license yet for obvious reasons. You know what's going on, and it's one of those things on my list where I told Reap I kind of want to move a lot of my experimentations into Ultra Engine simply for I guess the modular aspect and the ability to have more direct control than I have currently on some of the things I'm playing with. I'm finding it very, very intriguing that it's interesting, the features from before that I was thinking about, you just have already done, and it might simplify some of the stuff I want to do in the future. And I'm actually impressed. I'm really impressed by your work. I hope you know I'm like mad respect, bro. Like, damn.
Well, thank you. So here's the revised model from Marcel. The first one had, I think it was like 24,000 vertices. This one, it looks identical to me.
But it's only 5K.
But
5.7.
so that's certainly an improvement. So
Yeah, and
I think
this is something that's going to be in face.
so. The original that he had, it wasn't a closed mesh, and it had problems with the auto rigging, I guess, in Blender, and he wanted to redo it. Here's the results. It doesn't look like they're rigged yet.
No, I think it's just a view model.
That's just that there's no rigging
okay,
there. I can
yeah,
even on
okay,
the side I
yeah.
can see there's no rigging.
Yeah,
I don't see a skeleton or
skeleton.
anything
There's
added
no
to the
skeleton.
mesh. Yeah.
Okay.
But this is enough for Andy to paint it, I guess.
Well,
But he should rig it first, because if I painted the other model, it's a lot of work to unwrap this UV.
Yeah, you don't
stuff.
want to do a UV wrap before you rig the model. So you can get into some annoying trouble with clipping and other issues. I've done that too many times in the past.
Yeah, so what I really want to see is this in the correct pose, like holding a hand. I want to see what it looks like from the camera's view. Because until I see that, I'm not really going to know if this is usable or not. I mean, it looks good right now.
Can you put it in the scene? Just put it in the scene right now.
Well, it's untextured and it's unrigged. It's just going to be a gray.
I want to see what direction it's facing, because it should be facing.
From the camera when you drop it in. Yeah, that's actually a good point.
It's facing the wrong way.
Blah.
flipped.
Marcel.
Marcel.
No.
Yeah.
Oh
Okay,
god!
so-
Actually, oh man,
Also, the pivot point is incorrect.
Oh
yeah, it's offset
Oh,
from the
yeah.
center.
It's at, well, I mean, if his feet,
Sorry.
that's not really his feet. It might be his knees. It's not his feet because he would be very short, a short
Right.
man with large
the
arms.
camera should be right between the shoulder blades, right?
Well, it should be centered.
The
like,
camera.
yeah,
I would
well,
expect
no,
it. I think. Okay, let's see. It should be.
Mhm.
Let's see. Rotation.
Also, this is an FBX. With FBXs, it's kind of harder to get the pivot point. Like,
you could zero that in Blender without
Actually,
much issue.
select the view model, not the static mesh parent, but the actual view model, like child. And go to I want to see. I guess it's
Well, its
same,
position
right?
is 0, so
Right.
its rotation is it's pitched by 90 degrees.
Right.
I told you,
I don't
Reap, it's flipped. I've
Yeah.
worked with files like this, and it's a nightmare. But it's
Well,
annoying. But it's not a
well,
big deal. But
This I don't like. Importing FBX models has like some like because it's like a hierarchy and everything, and it's like a lot of like
you can, well, as I said, you just zero that in Blender. You know, you bring it in, you center it, and then you just export it
no,
again.
no, like you see how it's like a static mesh, and then it's like and then the actual model is like a view model.
I think it's because
Yeah.
FBX the z-axis is up. That's why it adds an extra node and then it rotates it by 90 degrees.
But if you
Yeah,
export
well,
the same model,
that's pretty standard because
if you export the same model as a GLTF, it works fine.
Yeah, with GLTF they use a left-handed axis, I think.
Yeah.
And Y is up, and one
Yeah, I
unit is
prefer
1
to.
meter. That was like a couple of
But
little
I-
decisions they made.
Yeah,
I
I
used
think-
to in a previous engine I was working on. What we would do is we would just immediately convert, and then we would do a scripted flip when we would import from FBX. So, you know, you get rid of the 90-degree flip, and then you just basically tell the engine, nope, this is what the file is gonna do, and this is how you. And there was, of course, the misalignment, but we built in a script system where you could like go in and by pixels basically just readjust it, and we had to build an entire editor around that.
Okay, so here's where the pivot is, and where I would expect it to be is right around here. Well,
let me open in Blender, take a look at myself. I'm gonna actually look it up in Blender and see how it actually looks.
so we want the pivot to point to be the person's eyes, right?
Yeah, so this way you can easily adjust the like camera fob and everything. Because I want the camera field of view to be separate than the actual like I want the view model camera to be separate from the actual camera viewpoint, because then you can adjust the fob of the view model separately. Because some people like a 90-degree view or whatever, but then it distorts the view model,
Yeah.
and that looks trash. So, and now since Ultra
We might
Engine
do
has that-
we might do a special shader for the view model and just have a defined projection matrix.
Well, can we just use the render layer system?
Yeah, but it's not as optimal.
Okay, yeah.
So I didn't understand that partially. You said render layer. Do you mean like you're reading the depth layer of like where the camera's at? for
Maybe
the
it should be
model
called
that's
like
being
render
displayed?
filter or render mask. But you can have multiple cameras that and you can control like what object each camera sees. So you could render like the view model with a different FOV.
Yeah, so like you can render like a model of a dancing hot dog on top of your scene, and it'll just always be in front of the scene or whatever.
That's an odd example.
Yeah,
I was gonna say Reap's had a little too many memes there. I guess he's watched too many odd videos.
yeah.
Yeah, if you have a second camera though, like if you have a directional light, that means there's a second there. Like for directional lights, it's there's not just one directional light for the level. There's like a new directional light gets created for every single camera that uses lighting, because the shadows have to be rendered from different from different perspectives.
So that description just reminds me of one of the projects that I still have has 5 camera views, and it's a pretty hefty performance cost when I run it in the best possible way. Well, I want Unreal Engine. I don't want to deal with it much more.
Yeah, I use about 4 or 5 cameras actually for the viewports here, because there's one camera for the grid so that the grid appears behind everything. There's another camera for the scene. There's another camera for selected objects. Here for the 2D viewports, they're rendered on top of each other. For the 3D viewports, you have to render those objects to a separate buffer, and then
I was gonna say that would be just like a projection map or like a screen map where you get just the slice of it in 2 dimensions instead of 3. That's something I'm dealing with. Unreal Engine doesn't like to play fair with that, though. It likes to push the 3D model into the frame buffer, and then you know how VRAM is very quickly eaten up.
yeah. And then you have another camera so that so any gizmos like this appear on top of everything else, even if they're behind something. So, but I also have lighting disabled on all of those cameras. So the gizmo appears on top.
So wait, for like scene lighting, then after you have each of those views from the cameras, do you do like a final pass for like the scene, or what would you define then for the lighting for the interaction with all the other views?
Oh no, the lighting is done in a forward pass.
Nice.
Yeah, deferred. I mean,
That's very good for performance.
Yeah, deferred. I mean, yeah, deferred rendering was very cool in like 2008. I was actually like one of the first. Like Leadworks was actually the second commercial product in the world, I think, that used deferred rendering. Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl was the first. So I jumped on that immediately, like when it, at the time. But now I'm saying like deferred rendering is really an obsolete technique now. There's much better ways to do it.
Only person I knew who worked on Shadow of Chernobyl was I think his name was Sergey, and he worked on part of the shadow mapping or something, and he said it was a pain, to put lightly. I think his name was Sergey.
I mean, it was probably pretty difficult, like, at the time when it was. I mean, it was a brand new technique.
2007, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I uploaded the quick fix of like what it should look like, so I just exported a quick like test GLB. I just did. Yeah.
Your knowledge base, Josh, never ceases to amaze me. It is actually, I'm amazed that you have been connected to all this for so long, and I never knew of you.
It amazes me too. All right.
Yeah.
Test.glb.
It looks the same, but if you put it in the scene.
Well, it's facing me.
Yeah. So. And then just place in the scene, and it
Test.glb. Okay.
Should work. It works for me.
What'd you do? Like zero it and then flip the z-axis?
No, I didn't flip the z-axis. What I did was I just moved the mesh down so the pivot point was in the right spot, and it exported as GLB, so I didn't have to rotate it. That's what you want, right?
Looks the same.
Yeah, it looks the same, but the pivot point is in the right spot, and the rotation should be 000 instead of 9000 or 89.999 or whatever.
Oh, you're right. Oh, because I rotated this one around to face the right direction. Yeah, actually.
Yeah,
I would put the pivot about 6 inches higher because his eye. I mean, those are his shoulders, so his eyes should be. That's like below his chin right there.
Well, view models are like, if you looked at any like memes about view models, the view models like look like that you're holding a gun like right up to your eye?
They're supposed to be offset slightly lower than, or well, closer to the face, but slightly lower than view.
You might be right.
Kind of like if you had a hunched neck and your neck is down further. That's what they've done for the last 30 years with view models. So
Yeah, because you do have a very like limited field of view. You might be right about that.
Yeah. I just hate when view models look like they try to make view models look correct, and it just doesn't look good.
Yeah. Something else I learned from VR actually is that your one reason for the weird some of the weirdness oddities of like first person dimensions in first person games are that your field of view, if you're looking straight forward, you have a greater field of view this way than you do this way. And this
God, I had to do the in the previous engine I was working in. I had to do some of those vertices calculations for the vertical FOV, and I hated it because the worst part is the human eye will also dart in that direction as it's scanning the horizon. If you don't calculate for that, well, you're gonna have some issues, especially in VR because people get sick.
Well, what I found is with the VR headsets, oftentimes they'll have the upper view range will be like something like this line, and then the lower view range will be about 10 degrees more.
Yep.
And the reason for that, and the same thing with side to side, like your right eye will be able to see out like maybe this far, but it'll only see like that far on the left side with your right eye because your nose is in the middle blocking your view.
I wish I could get, now he and I have not talked in a while, but I wish I could get Chet Falazek to talk to you because when he was talking about like the development for the Vive, he covered a lot of this during the developer Steam days and all that stuff. And he said one of the issues there is the things that we assume in reality do not apply fully in VR. And in VR, your brain already made assumptions, like you just said, with your nose there blocking a extended view, and you have to draw the line from the tip of the person's nose out at various angles, and you don't have that in a VR headset. It's one of the reasons that today they're actually looking into a lot of like eye tracking and trying to figure out where the eyes are going before the end user knows what's going on in the headset. Oh god, developing for VR is a nightmare, man, and I am not doing it until later.
Well, I wouldn't want to do the. I mean, the low level stuff sounds extremely difficult, but I've actually found it surprisingly easy. It's kind of easier in some ways than regular game because there's a lot of stuff you don't have to deal with. Everything feels more intuitive. Like
the only question I would ask there.
You can just
I was gonna say when you do like a VR perspective, you don't need a view model. You just have like a floating model that's attached to say the tracking to the controller, and that's a pretty simple integration. My experience mostly though is my own, where I get sick from VR, and so I've found I've had to make like optimizations for myself, and then I've had other people say to me like the Unreal development pipeline. I've had people be like, "Oh, what you did actually made me feel better playing VR and I can play much longer." And I'm like, well, all I did was I didn't want to make myself sick. I haven't developed in VR in probably about 6 months, but it's a whole different problem to solve. But it's interesting to hear it from your perspective on it because it feels like we all hit like these similar little issues with it and unique solutions and how we implement it.
Yeah, so this is a pretty good like technical view of the foliage system. This is what's kind of happening. I don't know if there's any position offset here, so it might just be laid out in a perfect grid. But this is basically what the foliage system is doing, and then add some random positioning to that, and you've got your forest.
When you say, well, you said offset and then random positioning, I can see that some of these squares are rotated by like 45 degrees, some are rotated by like 90 degrees. That I would assume is part of the seed. That's just the like this one is this, this one's this, this one's this. And then when you say offset, do you mean like the tilt on the terrain, or what do you mean by offset?
The position, so that they're not in a so they're not laid out in a perfect grid. The
Yeah.
way I came up with this actually is I was walking by a like an orchard, I guess, where trees are like spaced out in perfect rows, and I looked at that and I was like, yeah, in like nature, like they're also in rows. There's a lot of noise to it, but the trees sort of like on average they form perfect rows because trees sort of repel each other because they're competing for light
That's
and
actually
water.
not. That's actually more of a human influence. I grew up on a farm and I used to help plant trees and crops and maintain forests and stuff. And I could tell you that those rows, those perfect rows you see, that doesn't in nature what you actually get is a lot of overlap. You get overhang and you get like knotted roots, twisted roots, and some plants trying to grow under another and that changes the terrain. Now, in a topology sense, you can actually still define that for 3D rendering. I can't show you what I had worked on before, obviously, but there was a solution that we actually came up with for that. And what we did was simply just we stored part of that seed for like the randomness, where we would just do a random offset and then just store that, and that would be part of the octree that was generated over the terrain. It's interesting that you said that it was a orchard that gave you that idea. I can actually see that now that I'm looking at this with the rows.
Well, I'm
And
saying
it
like when
looks
you average out if you took all of the pine trees on Earth and you averaged the distance between them, you would come up with something like this. I mean,
well, remember what I asked you a little bit ago. I said, is that farmland like shrubbery? It looked like somebody had planted it. And I don't know if I would agree with you on that notion that if you took all the pine trees there would or all the trees
because
or
the errors cancel each other out basically.
yeah, you would ignore where there's the points of contention. And then when you do those calculations, though, I think you would still have a pretty broad range. Like not like a huge range, but you'd be talking between like 1 to 6 meters between each thing. And if you make a range like that, yeah, then I think you're correct. You would have. Hey, actually, you might be onto something there. I need to check some calculations on that. I'll get back to you on that. Actually, yeah, go on. I'm sorry, my bad.
It prevents trees from growing on top of each other. Because like that was like the first thing when I started doing this, like in Leadworks, like when I started painting objects onto the terrain, the very first problem I had was like, okay, how do you prevent like 1,000 rocks from appearing right here? How do you? Okay, you can. So my first attempt was to, I would just pick a random spot and I would say, is there a rock within 1 meter of this point? If not, then pick another random spot or something like that. So the distribution originally, like that was the original problem, and then I just kept refining the idea.
By the way, there is something wrong with the input system. But I think it's easier if I would show it to you than to describe it, because it will be a bit harder to describe.
Okay.
At least for me. So
Let's see.
wait. I just activated voice.
Matthias, hello.
It's been a while since I did input. I sent SpiderPig my input system, and he said it works. So I'm interested to see what your thing
So
is. Yeah.
I'm here now, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And I press the E button. Yes, I press it now. And this tree's gotten key hit. You see, I didn't press the key yet. I pressed it before, and the key hit is not getting resetted or something.
It's like locked.
It's locked, yes. So if I would go to drink water, and then I go to the tree, it disappears because the system thinks the button is hit it at this moment.
Well, you're also walking. Maybe something's getting confused in the event polling.
Well, wait. If you backed up back there, it looked like in the background stuff was disappearing too from where you were looking.
This is normal. This is the LOD system. But if I press E now and walk to a tree,
and you're sure you're not doing the you're not doing the key hit command only when you're within range. Like you're doing the key hit
Right.
command every frame, right?
I got it here.
Let's see.
Let me see. Handle interaction. Mesh layer here. This is one
Oh, so
part.
if mesh layer equals 1. Can you move the? Could you turn? Could you move this? Let's see. Is it possible to move the key hit command outside of this if statement and just turn it into a variable like bool key e equals key hit?
It would be possible, yes.
Because that might be what's called. It might just be that the key hit command is only getting called when you're within range, and that might be.
Yeah, it's getting called when you have when you actually hit something.
Wait,
So
what's the
the
name of
first
that
part-
the command, the function that you're in?
Handle foliage
foliage
pick,
pick.
and I use this in the update function. So
Let's see. Where's
Do a
it
pick.
called? Handle if get entity get
Yeah.
position. Oh yeah, this
This
is what
is-
I'm looking for. Okay, if pick entity get position, if the distance, I think you're only calling the command when you're within that distance, and so that
yes.
well that means if it hasn't been called since if it's not getting called every frame, then
Okay.
does that make sense?
I know what you say. Yes.
Okay, it's hard to explain, but
Yeah, I know what you say. I was thinking about, and maybe other people will also think about if you use key hit, he checks, if the key is currently down, but then it's key down, yes. Yeah, okay, it makes absolute sense now.
okay, cool.
Yeah, because every time you press a key on the keyboard, it gets pulled, and then that information gets stored in a bool array. And yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
if you don't put it in the right area, it can get stuck. So
Yeah, I've done
so
that
I
with like
would need
jumping
to-
sometimes and stuff like that.
I would need to do it before the if statement. So yeah, after this statement here, if window is not a null pointer, because
Well-
then we have.
since I have you, you can also look at my input system, and you can which allows for action sets and key bindings with glyph support and control support. So
But
got
yeah,
it.
It's looking good. The
So I
trash,
guess-
the trash bags are very realistic.
yeah, they are a bit too shiny, but this is the material. Yeah, and I noticed when you, or at least when we was writing, I think a few days ago, I saved this to a new scene. Right, save as. Yeah. So test. So and if I would change the seed now from the mesh layer. Wait. Foliage. If I would change now the seed from this to this and back, for some reasons the LEDs you see, they get not
Oh, okay.
rotated correctly.
Okay, now I know. Okay, cool. That helps actually.
Yeah,
All right,
so
I'll figure it out.
okay. I think it was better to show it to you. So
Yes, thank you.
okay, thanks.
Cool. Okay, so that's pretty much all I've got this week. Are there any questions or any projects that anybody wants to talk about before we go?
just I told myself not like in the open thing, back to like the sample project about the view model. So I'm waiting for him to get back on that.
Okay.
So we're just gonna.
I've started inquiring about alternative ways to do that if this isn't going to work out.
All right. Well, it's just taking a long time, and I'm kind of like at a standstill because I can shell out like the final area, but like why would I do that if I have a player that like isn't like 100% functioning and that can't open doors and you know what I mean?
I think we're probably going to learn a lot once we get the player working. That's why
Yeah.
I really don't like working with no art or with programmer art.
Programmer art, like there are some things you can do with just programmer art, like a view model, and like the view model is something like you need. But like with Cyclone, I mean, for like buttons and doors, like you need like a good collection, but there are things you can get away with if you have some models. If you're like, oh, this is just like the button. Like I think I used the button top model for the ball catcher.
Mm-hmm.
And then I use like a brush, like like trapezoid for like the launcher. But yeah, but yeah. So there's some things you can get away with it just program art, and there's other things you just can't do.
Recording.
So
Good morning, everybody.
When wait, I'm a little confused. You said
Ultra
something about
Engine.
characters. Like, what do you mean by like the character model? Is there not like a first person or third person kind of like camera setup, interaction, depth setup for character model, or what am I missing here? Or am I maybe I'm misunderstanding? I'm
Is
just
that
a
a
little
rape
confused.
question?
A little at you more, Josh, because it's your engine, and I'm confused because I would think with the way Reap has used like LEDWorks and Ultra Engine, you would just have the depth detection from the distance of the camera, and then the player coming up to the object, and then it would say I'm at this point, and then you just have that simple calculation of here's the thing, and there's where you press E on the keyboard.
Oh,
Okay.
whatever.
Before we
like-
continue, 2-minute break, everybody.
Okay.
I would answer your question because there's a lot of ways you can do that, solve that problem. But I'm gonna
The
wait.
way I know we're taking a 2-minute break. The way I've always done it is the engine I worked with before, which was very bare bones, and even with Source Engine, it's just a simple vector calculation of where's the camera.
It's a right. Well, in Source Engine, it's a it's weapon fizz gun.
Yeah,
But,
well, the
like,
fizz gun the fizz gun defines the position of the camera to the position of what's displayed on screen, and then that just tells the engine where the camera is, which is still the same vector calculation of an XYZ. And you're basically saying if I'm within the scene at this point and this object is here, you get a range around the object that defines the interaction with it. I don't know how it works with LEDWorks or Ultra Engine, so I just find what you were describing confusing because
Well, I describe things confusing because that's how my brain works. It makes sense for me, but yeah,
it
so-
seems like something that would be a simple solution.
Well, so with Cyclone, at least with Cyclone, what I did is that the player is a line of sight raycast from the point of the camera to like infinity, and I use that to check what the player's looking at, and if it's like I have like some conditions where if you're looking at a box dropper, the box dropper would drop a box, or it'll say, or like
Wait. I need to throttle back there because again, my knowledge of engines on this is a little not that
you know what a
great.
raycast is like.
I know what a raycast is. I'm asking, like, I wanted to ask, are you like when you say a raycast, are you doing like the pre-calculations for the raycast, or are you just doing a simple raycast out onto the scene and then you're using like the intersection from the ray, or
I'm using there's a raycast that's called World Pick, and every frame, at least in LEDWorks, there's probably a better way to do it in Ultra Engine, but every frame I would check to see what the player was looking at, and if there was an intersection made based on the collision rules, it would just the raycast would stop, and then that pick data would be stored in
okay. That answers the initial question, because that's what I was trying to figure out when you're talking about throwing a ray into the scene. You're not bouncing the ray. The ray is simply used as a point of inference, and that doesn't sound very efficient.
No,
and I'm not trying to insult you on that. That just doesn't sound like an efficient method for depth detection.
Cyclone that weren't very. Yeah, there wasn't very. In Cyclone was there's a lot of decisions that weren't very efficient in Cyclone, but it worked, and I had to go on.
I mean, you asked Josh how else would you do it, and funny enough, in the previous engine I was working in, we were doing depth detection like that. Yeah, we cast a ray into the scene for interaction with the environment, but the camera itself, I'm not allowed to talk about like the solutions we came up with for how we would orient it in the scene. But even in like Portal, the friend of mine, Jeep Barnett, has covered this, and I have looked over some of the stuff that he worked on in code. There's this orientation grid that you follow, and you're not casting a ray into the scene, though. You're not. What you're doing is you're simply. Well, there's a calculation with the camera projection system that they use with like the RT camera, and we did that also for the previous engine, and that you just store that in, is it in VRAM, and then from that image, which is like a 2D slice, you're able to just simply get the depth data. And you're not doing that only on a singular basis. You have this slice, this slice, this slice, and you're basically just using the integration of that scene that tells you don't need to cast. Yeah, like I'm just wondering, like, when again, maybe I'm misconstruing what you mean by like ray casting, but again, it's not the terms I'm used to from my experience in working in this. Then again, I have not worked with Leadworks, and I have not worked with Ultra Engine. I want to. I'm just trying to understand where I'm sitting on it, and maybe I've got a different definition of what these systems are.
Are you talking about feeding back information from the GPU to the CPU?
Yeah.
That seems.
Sorry if I'm not saying it right.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound right to me.
That seems like a lot of work just to figure out what button, if the player is pushing a button.
A lot of older engines do that though, and I don't know.
Yeah, but well, a raycast costs not that much performance. I mean, the physics engine is handling the raycast.
Yeah, the collision mesh and all that. Yeah, I understand.
And they check first if the ray is intersecting with an axoline bounding box, and if this is the case, they checked in this object with the bounding box. They check where is the ray is intersecting with. It's
now very old versions of OpenGL actually did have a feature where you could do picking with rendering. I haven't used it in so long, I forget what it's called, but like I think the first editor I wrote, I probably used that feature, and it would be like you would render your scene. Like if I clicked on the mouse, then I would render the scene, and there was and each primitive each object I drew would have like an ID, and then I would retrieve the results of that function, and it would tell me like which object was hit. But that functionality has been removed from OpenGL, at least for more than a decade.
That's
probably
closer to what I was thinking of, because that's what I recall from like Source Engine and other things with like RT cameras. You build the scene twice, and then you're taking each of the pieces within the scene. And I might be a little behind on how this tech is all working, so I'm trying to make sense and catch up with things.
Yeah, that's fine.
There is some technique you assign colors to different objects and render the objects in this color, and then you get if you click with the mouse, you get the object from the color, and with this color you can check which object you're interacting with. It's also an option.
Yeah, that's going to involve a round trip to the that will be extremely slow.
And I did my picking every frame because there was some functionality of Cyclone where I wanted to check what the player was looking at, and then I just used the same like system for object interaction. And I just
you say every frame. Now I have to ask: did you just leave it as like a open-ended like interval where it's like if someone's running at a higher frame, if their hardware is this and that, or is it just like a legitimate just frame selector every time that it's rendered? You go, okay, that's
every time update world is called, pretty much. I didn't
In Leadworks, the game loop speed was variable, and in Ultra, it's fixed. It runs independently from the frame rate.
Okay, that makes sense. All that makes much more sense than I'm trying to piece this together, and this is all making a little more sense now about how the engine is functioning. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So with as far as Xform goes, if we were an actual, running as a company, and we were burning through money paying everyone's salaries right now, then I would do things differently. But when when I'm stuck on a hard problem, I'd rather remain stuck on it so that it actually gets solved rather than get distracted and work on something else. Because it's like, I don't know. There's always like, if you run into something difficult and you feel like you can't solve it, it's always tempting to, well, I can't get this model, I can't get this animated thing that I need, whatever it is. I'm gonna go make some textures. I'm gonna go, work on some sounds. I'm gonna go make some music for my game because my game needs music, right? I think it's not good to avoid difficult problems like that, because then there's always an infinite number of things you can distract yourself with, and you'll go and do that, and then you'll come back and like a month later you'll still have the same problem. So that's kind of my attitude with this kind of stuff. So if we're stuck on something, I'd since we're not burning through cash, I'd rather kind of like remain stuck on it until we become unstuck.
Right.
We have the problem with the view model, right?
Well, we still don't have it, and it's been a month. But we might. I mean, what we have
Right.
now, it looks pretty good, so it might work.
So if the model is rigged, and then he can send me then to create the textures. I think the textures will not take longer than 1 day.
Yeah, we don't even need I don't even need like real textures. I just want to see the geometry in the pose from the view of the camera, so we can see if the gun looks right. Because it's just like, it's so easy to mess it up.
Yeah, and I want the pivot point and everything to be where it should be in the orientation.
On your adjustments, Rape, you were close, but again, when you're talking about the view model, you
I
have to
did.
do.
I did that in 5 did
Well, did you do it? I'm.
I did in Blender. Like I
You
just
did it. Okay, that's what I was saying. Yeah, do it in Blender, because Blender will give you the very fast access to the FBX file.
Well, that's what I did. I just loaded the FBX in Blender and I just moved it down and I re-exported it. It took 5-10 seconds.
Well, I've seen so many situations where the model looks fine, like if you're just looking at it, but then you get it into first-person view, and it's like, oh, the wrists look like huge, like sausages or something, and the fingers look weird.
Well, what you could use, so when you do the quick pivot and you get the center of the model set up in Blender, you can also do like a quick skeleton where it just basically makes like a spine, and then you just make the attachment where the shoulders should be, and then you don't let it attach to, say, the vertices of the model, and then the model sits in the position it should be. Then you just take that and throw that into a display. I've done that before for Source Engine and stuff.
Well, we'll see.
And then the model, of course, is not rigged.
We'll see with what Marcel comes up with, and if it doesn't work out, then there's another approach I have in mind, but we'll see what happens.
I can rig a model if you want me to maybe attempt it in the near future. So
we'll see. It's like, I mean,
I was gonna say put that on the back burner. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I was ready to move on, and then he is getting results, and I mean, I understand it's something difficult that he probably doesn't have a lot of experience with, and this is entirely voluntary. Yeah, let's just see what happens, and I'm at the point now where I will pursue like multiple routes if
I don't. The only thing I don't understand is, and maybe you can clarify this, is like, what's the exact and you don't have to say like the project or anything, but like, what do you need the model rigged for? Like, what's the value of it? What'll it do? Is this a feature that you're developing for the engine? Like,
Do you,
what is
okay,
this?
do you know about our sample project?
No, I don't.
Okay.
The only one I talked to is you and Reap, so I'm kind of
So for the benefit of you and the folks at home, github.com/ultra engine repositories.
That's what I thought.
Oh,
yeah. Reap mentioned this. I have not checked it out yet. So
Xform. Basically, we looked at SCP 5K. Do you know what this is?
only through what Reap has sent me, so not
Yeah,
a lot of information.
I
So
haven't been like telling them much about like what we've been doing because of everything. But
it's like tangential, limited inputs. So
I looked at this and I was like, this would make a pretty good setting for like a first-person shooter example. I like it because it's kind of a dungeon environment, like which limits. It's got a limited scope.
it reminds me of that other game where you get dropped into an environment just from the narrow FOV and everything. This looks like, what is this, Unity?
They made this with Unreal, I think.
Unreal? Okay.
But what I like about it is just the environment is realistic, modern day. It's a very limited scope. I actually have a bit of a connection to the SCP games because my program 3D World Studio, which predates any game engine I wrote, that editor is what was used for creating the levels in what is it, SCP? What was the first big one?
no clue.
Crap. It was like the first when it first got popular. SCP games. It'll be like the biggest one listed. SCP games. I can't remember the name of it, and I get stupid when the camera goes on. Curated list.
So, from what was just shown with like, yeah, with this project, from what was just what you just mentioned with it, I take it that Ultra Engine doesn't quite have the systems to do this like perspective kind of first person animation, any of that, or
No, it
Yes,
should be in there. Everything we need should be
like
there.
it should, but it hasn't been battle tested.
Yeah.
So this is the project. The idea is that this project is supposed to battle test all of the functionality of the engines, the rendering system, the features, and have a demo project to showcase how the best practices of using the engine.
So this is SCP Containment Breach, and all the levels were designed in a program I wrote called 3D World Studio. I think with a pirated version, but I'm not going to get too mad.
it's only illegal if you get caught. Remember, wink, wink.
No, that's not true. It's
Come on, it's a joke.
it's morally wrong, and Jesus knows.
Yes, I agree.
So, yeah. So, anyways, they used my software to make the levels for Containment Breach, and okay, so we're basically making something that's like an SCP game without the name SCP. Instead, it's called Xform, like X Files, Lifeform. And then
I already like it already. All right. Good.
If desired, after we finish this, we can take this and then just rebrand it as an SCP game if we wish to go down that route. The thing I do like about that possibility is it's very difficult to create a new IP nowadays, like a new like game world. Anything, nobody wants anything new because I think everybody's just like saturated with the number of
Reap,
brands.
Reap and I were
brands
talking about this. What people get attached to is marketable versus something brand new.
Yeah,
Yeah, why I think I made a Portal clone.
Yeah, you really can't do anything new nowadays because nobody wants anything new. Like,
They say they do, but yeah, they don't.
They want it's what Bob Gale says. They want the same thing but different.
well, yeah, I mean, imagine if like, some classic game was never made, and then, like Half-Life or whatever, and then if it was released today, and it didn't look like an old game, it just looked like a modern game. Like it would just get ignored because it's like, wait, I've never heard of this before. So you can't really create a new universe, and that's like, I think that's something that indies have a lot of trouble with, is just creating a universe and getting some initial enthusiasm in what you're making, and also the observation that open source projects only work when they're a clone of something else, like just
I
because
mean, if you've seen all the engines, as you know, they're all clones of going back to Quake and Doom. So
well,
just branches.
what I mean is like Libra or Open Office it was good because everybody knew what it should look like, because everybody knew that it was supposed to be Microsoft Word for Linux.
You're giving me flashbacks on that one, man. Back to high school. Oof.
So it's having that design is very valuable, and you also have like a built-in audience of like tens of thousands of people at least.
So I don't want us to go too far off. We were talking about like the rigging and setting up of like view models or like meshes, I think is where we were on that. Um am I, before I continue with that point, is that correct? Or
Just the view model is just the problem.
We're just waiting for the view model with
so
the animation and the rigging.
I wanna say this. I don't have a license for your engine. I wish I did, but with everything going on, we talked. If I were to supply something, the only thing I would say is I don't want it connected to me, if that makes sense. So that's why I think that's why I'm more, at this point, more curious to see where you're going and what you're looking for and what you need. But if I ever do supply anything, I will not be connected to it, if you're okay with that. Like, you can take all the rights to it. I really don't care. Like, Reap can tell you when I say these kinds of things, that's legitimately where I come from on it. But I do know how to rig models. I do know how to set up a skeleton now in Blender. I can do it pretty good. So let me know in the future what happens there, and I might be able to supply you with something.
Turn my back on. I have no comment at this time.
No comment. Good. Okay.
So we can actually, I mean, there's actually like quite a lot. These aren't just SCP, but there's it's actually easier to find like enemy models that are free than it is to find view models. View models seem to be like the thing that nobody can make.
They're extremely difficult because you're constrained by the initial skeleton of the original model, and then you have to work within the camera view of the engine and then of course the other problem when you rig a view model is the field of view that the end user can dictate for the engine, which is usually why a lot of modern engines create a broader like view model, or you get clipping or like edges that are cut off with various games like Fallout or Skyrim or Source Engine games. I've worked with view models plenty before, and it with a project Reap and I worked on, which was like Project Beta with Portal, that was a pain to get view models done correctly, and we still have clipping issues on some of those. And I worked with that with another individual.
So let's see. There were some in here. I'd have to go through more. I'm less worried about like I'm less worried about like the actual creatures because we're pretty open ended on like what these things are going to be. There's quite a lot of variety that we can go
So
with.
is this like the way that it's been described? It sounds like this is like going to be like a demo thing, but is this actually going to be? And you don't have to answer, but is this like actually going to end up being like a product that is sold or free to download or?
All all I want to focus on right now is just having a one level sample game that looks good. You know, making something small that looks professional. That's
So
my goal.
on Sketchfab, I'm curious, have you like typed in like reload animations or anything like that to see what people have generated?
Let's see.
Because that might
try
give you
FPS. Well, also I have to have something that where I have to be able to distribute these
yeah.
to my users, so they need to be either free or I have to own it or I have
Or
to
buy the rights to it. Yeah.
buy a license for it.
Because if you look up like FPS hands and all that, then you'll or like first person view, you'll find the stuff that I think you're looking for.
So there's a really well. That's we don't really know.
I think this is actually one of the series I buy for the game.
Yeah.
This guy makes good view models.
Yeah, those hands, those arms look very oddly proportioned, but that might be intentional.
I don't know if that's intentional, other than from the first person perspective where it looks normal, which would seem pretty normal for a view model.
So
really, what you'd really want to be looking for, and you can correct me on this in case I'm making a mistake here, is you'd want to get like a rigged view model, and then from the rigged view model, you'd want to make attachment points for guns, and then through those attachment points, if you want to make like custom reload animations or something else, you can also use. I don't know how Ultra Engine would do it, but I know you can load package files in like Unreal and Unity that I've done before for reloading or modifying an object, etc. You're dragging that yourself, right?
Yeah.
That's something that you could define in Engine as well.
The way we would do it is just we would have like a bone or something to mark where the gun attaches, and then we can swap out like multiple weapons, and you would have like one pose for holding a pistol, one for holding some kind of rifle. So this is tilted to the left for some reason, and the default camera angle in here is real. The FOV is really strange, so I can't really tell how it would look in the game. This is probably like the best I've seen, and it's still kind of like I'm not sure if it's.
Mostly clarifying. It makes sense. I know how to set up an initial skeleton like that. It would just take me a little bit of time at this point, but I know exactly what you're looking for.
Andy?
No.
That looks pretty good. Of course, we're not making a guy. I don't think we want a guy with green gloves, but yeah, and we need to actually like do some experimenting with like the position and the FOV and stuff, and then compare it to other games.
Arguably, I would say my favorite ways in which you can orient something like this once you have the model in place and the rigging done is like the Master Chief Collection or Portal 2, where the end user can type in like an XYZ coordinate where the gun sits on the screen and all that within a defined range that the engine sets.
We can do that with the component system, but it's just really, really tedious and annoying and stupid.
Oh, I know it's tedious. I've dealt with systems like that.
Well, can we get it looking good at one orientation? before
Yeah.
we worry
That would
about.
be. Yeah, I was gonna say that would be where
Infinity.
you start. Like, yeah, you'd want to get once you get the initial system in, and where I called it the attachment point. You had said like you want the gun to be here and there, and that's where the
I mean,
model.
here's the default, and this looks awful. I mean, you couldn't use this.
And yeah, that's
Takes too much of the view.
I mean, you'd want to bring that down to like a 45-degree FOV, like really close, and then you'd take this. And when you said like we don't want the green gloves, obviously you can just change the texture, but you actually would have to get a separate model for the arms,
Well,
and
he's
then
gonna-
you want to
he's
do.
If we paint that pink, he's gonna have very some strange skin disease.
Well, I was saying like no. What you'd want to do in this case is like what I would do if I were to ever work on a project like this is I would take the skeleton only, and then I would get rid of the mesh, and then I would add my own mesh over it. That I like. Maybe I'd take pictures of my own arms or something, and then just blow them up. And,
I posted in the chat the one I use.
Let's see. Who's shooting? I hear.
You have a video playing in the background.
as a video, yeah.
Okay.
It's not bad. The one you posted.
I noticed the wrists look.
The wrist is bent oddly, but it's not too bad compared to like what I've seen with a lot of Source Engine stuff. But again, we're talking a 15-year-old engine at that point.
Yeah, even like the Left 4 Dead 1 view models were kind of weird, like with the arms.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like the only thing I see here is it looks like the rigging on the left arm that's extended over the barrel where he's holding it. It looks like the ulna is bent outward, and it's where the sleeve is modeled onto the skin. It looks like the bone is almost jutting up, and then the other hand holding it. Oh, the wrist is bent at an upward right angle. That's like something you saw in old Call of Duty games. It's not a bad setup, but it's not.
I think for the price, it's okay. €6
Yeah.
or
For
something.
$6, yeah, I was gonna
What-
say
what-
for like $6, that's not a bad deal.
What
But
do you expect for $6? So yeah,
Can we see what it looks like in your game?
yeah, sure.
Okay.
But I need to start up a second.
Okay.
man, for $6, $6 is $6. I could do
Well,
a lot
I'd
with
rather-
rigging for $6.
I'd rather pay $7 and get something that's worth perfect.
And that's good for like a Source game, not even a Source 2 game.
Yeah,
but
and
a
again,
Source
I can't just pay $6 and then give it to everybody who uses Ultra for free.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I start up. It
Okay.
takes a moment.
Okay.
I gotta say, I do find it funny we went from discussing really interesting engine systems to my asking a really stupid question, and now we're talking about rigged models and everything. My bad again, Josh. I apologize. Every time I come in here, this is where it always goes.
So I
this
share the
is,
screen.
Okay, he's got it.
Yeah, that's,
I think the FPS could be a bit low because I got another game open. Oh, this is, but I adjusted not really the view model. So yeah, you got also multiple animations like this or the reload.
Yeah, the animations look quite good. It's hard for me to tell if the orientation is right.
I prefer it to be in the bottom right corner.
yeah,
Yeah, but
I would what I would. Yeah, I was gonna say I got a Reap's kind of right there. I kind of think if you had it like offset, but again, that's something that really isn't a
That's
big
like-
deal.
That's like an artistic
Yeah.
I mean, you can configure it. It's it's not related to the model itself.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, there's
implementation
just a
that
bunch of
you've done is
different
pretty
factors.
good.
And you got even more animations. I can show it in the editor. I need to find it. I think it's a model. first.
I mean, this is
person.
actually a great example here, Josh, where it's like we can look at something on like Sketchfab and then we can have a chat about how, oh, well, there's issue there, and then you see how he implements it, and the way he implements it actually works. And
Oh, you
I
got-
like that. That's
got
Can you
Something
keep
I've
that
missed.
window full screen?
Oh yeah, you have multiple animations like 18. And
wait,
really-
can you rotate the model there? I want to see the other side when you're doing the reload. I want to see what the animation does. Now play it from there, like so it does not hit the slide on the gun. So the slide on the gun doesn't move.
Yeah. You mean this?
Well,
thing here?
that's an SBR, and with the SBR, you pull the slide back to eject the main round or the spent round from the chamber as you load the new magazine. I noticed that there's no animation set for that because the hand goes straight back to the barrel, and the other hand is on the See, it's not hitting the slide, and I wonder with this animation set, there's probably something there where they do it, but it doesn't look like the rigging is set up for that. It looks like you know what it looks like? It looks like you're set up with this, which is not really a problem, where it's set off to slightly offset of the right, and you're just seeing the gun from that other angle. So you're not really seeing the full reload animation that would be there. Yeah, you're looking at it from that angle. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I know guns, and that's an SBR, and the slide is not being pulled back at all.
No. But yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
looks
$6
good.
though.
It looks good. Yeah, see right there where he pulls back, it's not like it's just behind. And that's fine from a camera perspective for first person. So
I think we played too much. I think he is putting it back.
is he pulling it back? Is he?
It's getting pulled back, yes.
Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. It's hard. Sorry, it's hard to see on my second screen. So, okay. So they did get that. Okay, good.
And now
Interesting.
it's flipped to.
Oh, it is moving. I can see it. Like, of course, it looks like 3 pixels on my end, but I can see it. Nice. Okay, my bad then. Really nice. That's a good animation set for that gun.
Yeah, you did
Yeah.
get a very good deal.
And he got also like other guns like the P90, for example. I like the P90 even more.
One of my favorite guns from Stargate.
Is there anything you can do, Josh, to make view models a little less awful on your side? Or is like I would like to have a FPS view.
Do you have the reload animation, by the way, quickly?
I don't have
Or-
any content to even like test with right now.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I kind of want to be able to preview my view models in the model editor without like making like an
yeah.
sample project.
We might be able to come up with like if we need to, we can come up with some like scripted tool that does that.
Like set camera position, and then you just set it to like the orientation of the model, and then you can just adjust the camera position, and then you can just like record or save that information. So in your code or something, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so far, like we have nothing. Like we have nothing to test with at all. So let's try to solve that problem.
For $6, you get many stuff. So yeah.
These are. I was gonna say if you could move the camera back to like a first-person perspective, and then go back to the reload animation, because from the side it looked like something I would do when I would rig models, so from the first-person perspective, it doesn't look as bad as it did from like the weird, odd angle.
I can show it you in game. Actually, I think it's you can see it in game better, or at least a bit better than.
And these are not bad animations from the first person perspective. Like this is the kind of stuff I used to do back in the Gmod days. Like I would be offered, positions and stuff when I would do really, really crappy rigging, and this is beyond what I would do at times. So pretty good.
Yeah, if these were like if I had a license to that I could pass on to for these, or if it was free, then I would probably just use something like this and call it a day.
Is there not a package or like someone you could reach out to implement stuff like this, or
Well,
You can write this guy, I think. I righted him if he can make a knife model, but he has no time. So if he can make the view model with a knife, because he has different guns and but no melee weapon like knife or barrel or something else.
yeah.
And here this is because we have no callback yet, so he stops after 1000 milliseconds. He stops the reload animation. With the reload callback, it would be actually possible to wait until he's done
Okay.
to get back to the normal animation state. But
so I want to ask you on that then, Josh. So like you don't have any like so for the engine supports it clearly as we can see. So you don't have like any default animation sets or anything like that right now.
No, that's what we're attempting to create.
Well, there's a part of me right now where I do have my own creations and stuff. Something you and I can talk about maybe. But like I said, I don't want any connection to it. I don't want my name brought up if I were to be involved, and I will just hand it off to you, and you can do whatever you want with it. But I'll talk with Reap about that as well, potentially. So,
One more thing I want to touch on. I kind of like mentioned it before, but we do have the ability to load scenes from Unity now. A couple of extensions got released last week. I've been loading models and a scene from Unity, and I can tell you a couple of things. One is that with Unity, the normal maps are flipped on the y-axis, so they need to be flipped. They need to be inverted on the y-axis to do the GLTF, so that they're following the GLTF method that we use. Let's see. Okay, so Unity they have something called a mask texture, and they store. I think it's metalness is the first one. I forget what the others are.
it's roughness, detail map, and normal map, and a couple other things. I have some Unity files I was asking you about earlier.
I'm just talking about one single texture. They store metalness and some others like ambient occlusion, and I think probably roughness.
It's the so if it has like it's AO, it's roughness, and then you have it's a DDS file, I think. But I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
It's actually it's smoothness. So what this script does is it takes those images and it will convert them into the standard metal rough ambient occlusion maps that we use. And what it's doing here is it's inverting, I guess the alpha. Yeah, it's inverting the alpha channel, and so it's converting it from smoothness to roughness, basically.
Okay.
So if you use this script, you can get those images into Ultra if you need to, and then there's also a scene loader script. And that's actually how I was able to get that canyon scene into the engine. There's a little bit of weirdness there because I think the way the way Ultra treats models is it's a hierarchical object that you can place, and you can place instances of it in the scene. I think the way Unity treats FBX models is it's a container of meshes that you can use to build prefabs out of. So like they often they will break the model hierarchy in their scenes, which I don't think is a good idea. But that does make things a little bit more complicated. It's best to break all prefabs before you export. And there's also a JSON exporter for Unity that's how I was able to load this stuff in. So it's not perfect, but it does. I have been able to use it successfully. So that's kind of interesting that we can get that content in. I've talked to a few authors of this kind of stuff, and the people I talked to were pretty open to selling things as like a Steam DLC or something like that. And we know in the past those have sold well. So yeah, I am very interested in getting high quality artwork into the engine and making it available for you guys. So if you're somebody watching this video, then certainly feel free to reach out to me.
Maybe you
Anyways.
could. Maybe I tell it when the record is off. I got an idea, which might be interesting.
Okay. So that's pretty much all I've got this week. Do you guys have anything else to talk about?
I just noticed some like weird thing with the environment. I don't think it will come up in stream, but I think it was posted in the chat. I can share my screen real quick. I don't think it'll show up, but whatever. Screen. So this is part of the Xform project. Just give me a moment. So I don't know if you can see this, but there's some blotching right here. See this like step right here? I can see it. And then they move on. This is part of Xform.
Okay,
This
I
is
know what's
the-
going on.
Yeah, this is test room. So I just want to bring it up to you. Since you have to like get into a corner and then it,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I changed the way the calculation there, and obviously it's wrong.
yeah, because you were trying to fix the zooming error that I also pointed out.
So
you can't like
the thing is, like, I'll just revert it back to how it was before. But I don't really plan on solving it like this way because this is going to get replaced when I move the calling over to the GPU. This
Right.
is something else that gets moved to the GPU. And so this is all going to be rewritten anyways. So I'll just revert it back to how it was before, and then we'll just wait like a month or two until it's all running on the GPU, and then it'll just automatically be fixed.
Maybe
Also-
an option if you say you change the color to the GPU. I think we talked about a few 2 or 3 weeks again. Maybe an option to enable or disable it would be good, so that you still can have the CPU calling. If, for example, someone has not a big graphics card or something like this and got trouble with the graphics card.
The cost on the GPU is really, really minimal.
Okay.
So the foliage system, it can call like 1 million instances in like zero. I mean the time I haven't measured it, but like from what I can tell, like it doesn't take any time. However, like in the future, like we might have like if we have like a low end fallback, then that's when we might actually need CPU calling, not because of performance, but just because of the capabilities of the GPU. If we want to go lower, like Mac support, they're cut off at OpenGL 4.2. One thing very interesting that I have found is that typically it's happened that okay, there was some terrain code that I was going to move over to the GPU from the CPU, and the first thing I had to do was rewrite it in a way that was where it would function in a shader. And what I found is when you write an algorithm in a way that works on a shader, when you run that code on the CPU, it tends to be extremely fast. And so what happened in that instance was one of the things that I was planning on running on the GPU, it actually, once I had it working, and then
okay.
once I had it working,
He's
so
still
that
talking, but I can't hear him.
what's that? Once I had it working on the in a way that it would work as a shader, and I was ready to move it over to a shader, then I no longer had a need to because it was so fast.
Is that like a singular basis? Because if you're talking like vertex shaders and stuff, then that would just become a compound issue as you have a more complex scene. Unless I'm misunderstanding something there.
C++ is like magic if you're not allocating any memory. It runs like magically impossibly fast.
But
If
yeah,
you're not, if you're doing things in a loop and you're just doing, all you're doing is like multiplication and division and addition and subtraction, then C++ is faster than it seems like would be possible. It's just when you start returning a lot of structures and allocating things like dynamically, then things slow way down. So if you have like a loop of like 10,000 objects, if you declare all your variables outside that loop, it gets like just ridiculously fast. And if you have any high frequency code, things that are done over and over again, you can. It takes a lot of work to optimize it like that. But if you do, you can make C++ run like ridiculously fast, like faster than it seems like should be possible.
The only thing I wanted to ask you about was the inclusion of the new gizmo I made. I sent you.
Yes, I
Or
will
just-
add it.
Yeah. Like, what do you think? It looks a lot better. I think the arrows are more efficient.
I think the proportions are good. I think the lines look a little thick to me,
Maybe.
but I mean that's really nitpicking. It looks good.
Yeah. Like, I was experimenting with like having like this part be like up here and everything, and it just didn't look good or act good. I was also experimenting with like having like this be part of like go over here so you can like move the z axis from, so it looks like you can grab z,
From like a position like that.
yeah, from like this, and but it got weird when you tried to,
Yeah.
so I just removed it.
Yeah, let's with this kind of stuff especially, I think let's not get creative. Let's just give people what they expect because it's like
Yeah.
I think there's not a lot of tolerance for any changes to the most basic functionality.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Oh, and like one final thought. Also, I didn't really bring it all together. So the editor I wrote was used for the editor for SCP containment breach. If we did make a new SCP game, even though I didn't really have anything to do with the original, I have another editor. This editor, and it would be possible. It would be an option for us to include like a custom build of the Ultra editor with this theoretical new SCP game, so that people can create their own adventures.
Well, could it be? Does it have to be like game specific, or can it just be like, let's say I make a game and I want my customers to make custom apps? Like, how would that process go? Or if Andy wants,
There. Oh, so okay, the way I would do this is maybe maybe there would be a free editor out there with some restrictions that anybody can tap into, and then but if they want to distribute the editor with their as part of their game, then that's when like a licensing fee for that would come in.
well, yeah, because I was also talking to other people, and what they are doing is that they're using Hammer and they're using like a lot of like extensions, a lot of like hackery. Because what they're doing, they like the BSP editing, and I showed them Ultra Engine, and they're like, "Wow, this is really great," but can they export light maps? Because people like light maps because of the clean shadows and lack of shadow banding and everything. And if you had like a light baking system in it that you can export, you would have more customers because they actually have an editor that is actually good, and they can use it for whatever engine or purpose they need it for. Let's say they want to make like a mobile game, which is something you said you want nothing to do with besides if it has to do with meta. But they want a hammer like editor or an editor like yours, they can just make their levels with your editor, export it as GLTF, and then put it into whatever they need it for.
Well, it's a possibility. I mean,
I personally think light maps are the relic of older days.
I was gonna say this sounds like something I talked with you about before, Reap, and it sounds almost like a legacy feature.
Well, no, I'm just talking to, people
but
you know who too, but they said they needed light maps, and
yeah.
for whatever reason, like,
with the hardware nowadays, I mean,
well, I don't know what they need the light maps for. I don't know if it's a preference. I don't know if they need it because of bottlenecks or what they're targeting. They just said they needed it.
Yeah. I actually am I'm kind of changing my attitude of okay, so like ray tracing it's very technically impressive. But the techniques that we use that are now, I guess now they're considered traditional, like shadow mapping and other stuff. We use those techniques because they were very scalable. 6 years ago they were very, very scalable. We could have had lower res games with more advanced techniques, but we chose to use things like shadow maps because it was just like the best compromise. And now, when hardware has increased in power, it's still the most scalable technique. Like, I mean, we're at the stage where we can finally have ray traced Quake 1, but that's not really how people want to allocate their processing power. So
Have you looked at what the NVIDIA stuff? I think I sent you some stuff on it before. What they did with Cyberpunk, with like their psychopath tracing and all that nonsense. There's some solutions there in the documentation that they published, where it does give you a benefit, and it doesn't take as much local processing power as one would assume.
I don't know.
I don't know if you read through it or not when I had sent it before.
I don't recall this. It's like some kind of temporal thing, right?
It was probably a long time ago. When we were
Okay.
discussing ray tracing like months ago.
Yeah. Anyways, my point is, I'm kind of thinking like, I'm kind of like I've always been like, dynamic everything is the best, but I'm actually thinking like some kind of mixed lighting is probably going to end up being a really good
Well, the
idea,
one thing
like a combination of light maps and dynamic shadow maps.
Well, because the issue I don't like I don't like it in any game. I didn't like it in Legworks. I don't like it when I see it. Like, it just looks really, really gross. Is that when you get like a spotlight? I'm gonna try this in the full viewport.
Shadow acne.
Yeah, I hate shadow acne.
Okay,
but it makes me angry.
Okay, so that's we could. Yeah, I also explored like a lot of alternative ways of doing shadow mapping. I implemented variance shadow maps, which look gorgeous under the right conditions, and exponential shadow maps, which attempt to solve a problem of variance shadow maps, but don't really work.
You have to get like at like the right angle to like It's like always the perfect like angle to like the scene, and then you just see all that acne. It just really gross.
Yeah, so you're
Um,
having trouble producing the effect, first of all. But
yeah, yeah, because
what
I'm
I
on
found
camera
is
and
like with all of
I'm on
those
the spot.
techniques, like the standard shadow filtering is so much more performant. Like yeah, the solution to shadow acne is probably just use a graphics card with bigger shadow maps. Like this
That's what
stuff, like these techniques are going to get better and better as the GPUs get better. Because they're extremely scalable.
That actually, there's a question there I want to ask because it kind of ties into this discussion of lighting and shadow maps, and I'm curious, are you currently looking into scene reconstruction or anything like that, or have you not? You don't want to do like, I don't mean like just DLSS. I mean like full on scene reconstruction. Have you looked into any of that, or is that not on the radar right now?
No, it's not really something I'm thinking about.
Okay.
Think the future, or what is the big future's frame generation
Well,
algorithm?
I would disagree that frame generation is the future. I think in-scene painting is the future, but we don't have the GPUs for that right now. And I've talked with Josh about that before.
Well, I mean, this is all stuff that we said like 10 years ago, and the fact is, you know, the future is here. In the future, it turns out the future is DirectX 11 and OpenGL using.
Well, I mean, I a year ago I would have disagreed with you, but now from what I've learned, especially dealing with what you've taught me and everything, I think you're correct. And it's interesting to say the least. It's like we're optimizing the older systems. I was going to ask, well, Reap mentioned like Hammer, and the only thing I'm familiar with in like pre-baking is VRAD, but I thought VRAD was like a like legacy and dead. So I don't know. I'm a little confused as to what you mean when you're talking about like pre-baked lighting or pre-baked
Well,
scenes.
we could do GI with we could split the lighting up so that the direct component was using what we have right now, and then we could have an indirect component that was using light maps. It's hard to do light maps with normal mapping and specular reflection. It's possible, but I don't know if that's really something that I want to get into. I know exactly how to do it. I just I don't know if I want to make the effort, and I don't know.
I
if it's
mean,
gonna
like
make
I'm
money.
looking at like Reap in his stream. He's showing, you know,
I
the
think
setting up and stuff. Is this?
I think I have to update my shaders or something. I'm not getting any shadows. That's why I can't make the shadow banding issue. Because
That's what I was trying to understand here because it looks like you're moving around like light sources, and I'm wondering where the shadows are. Does that come after you generate the map? Is this dynamic? I'm a little confused.
It's supposed to be dynamic, but I don't think I updated my shaders. I just updated the editor, but I'm
So
not
wait. So with the way Ultra Engine works, are these just like projected textures, or what are how does this
No,
lighting?
they're shadow maps. He just either the lighting, either the shadows are disabled on that light, or he's missing.
No,
like,
the shadows are not disabled. It's cast shadows, and then this says cast shadows.
Okay.
I don't know.
Your
I probably
shaders
have
are
to-
probably out of sync.
Yeah, let me. I don't have an easy way to update.
I'm
this.
sorry. I'm again, as you know, I'm not very familiar with your engine, and I'm trying to understand this from the perspective of like Unreal, Unity, and Source Engine, and
Close this out.
they all have really different systems, and I'm just trying to really grasp like the full goals and the perspective of what you're working on and what you're doing for. And I'm impressed by Ultra Engine, but it's like I just don't understand some of these systems or the terminologies that are used.
Yeah.
And then again, I'm a little out of date.
So in my stream, if you guys look at this is something I did years ago. This was with Leadworks, and this doesn't really look. I mean, this is like 2009. It doesn't look that great.
Too
but
baby.
it shows you the idea here is to combine light mapped indirect lighting with direct dynamic lighting.
When you say direct dynamic lighting, I need to ask a clarification there. because it looked like the reflective surface looked like a cube map, like a high resolution cube map for 2009. Was
What
that like a
reflective
real time
surface?
reflection, or was that just a QMAP update when you like right there where it shows the back reflecting the light? Yeah, right there. Is that a
The back
QMAP?
of what?
Is
What do you mean?
that object that's moving around and rotating. If you continue playing it, yeah, that thing right there. Like, what is the methodology of reflecting the scene or showing the light bouncing?
Oh, that's so that's it's colored shadows basically.
That's a unique solution. Not something I would consider, but
It's kind
I mean,
of
it
it's kind of a
works.
pain because it only works with like one layer.
I was gonna say, wouldn't that just be from a single input where you have to calculate some part of the scene that's projected onto the material?
Basically you render a color buffer along with your depth buffer for the shadow map. And
Oh,
that's not really the point of that's just kind of something extra. What I'm trying to get across here is you have the indirect lighting down here, the yellow around this stairwell, or actually no, I guess it would be like this stuff in the shadow isn't just flat gray; it has indirect lighting. But the direct
Right.
component of that is provided by the shadow mapped light. So you
that's
can
my
combine.
apology on that one. I was trying, like, I'm looking at the scene. I'm trying to piece together like the full scene lighting and everything you had there. That I was gonna get to the stairwell because I was gonna ask if that was pre-computed or if that was real time.
Yeah, the indirect lighting here is pre-computed. I'm kind of, I mean, nothing I say is absolute certain ahead of before the fact, but I'm kind of thinking something like that, like a modern implementation of that. That might actually be a lot more valuable to people than actually ray tracing.
I was going to bring that up with you because that's where I was kind of leading you. Because when I've dealt with like what Valve has said in other companies, they've abandoned things like pre-computed lighting, and I have not seen an engine today, well, outside of like specialized uses of like Unity and Unreal, where you can actually set that up. And I think in very specific scenes, and maybe you could actually broaden it with dynamic lighting and other implementations, I think that would be a very valuable tool.
I think light mapping is actually being used quite a lot. Today.
I don't mean light mapping. I'm more talking like the classical forms that Valve had used, like that I'm familiar with, of like Hammer with VRAD and all that, which is technically a light map. It's defined in the VMT files and everything. But
I think that stuff is still getting used a lot today. It doesn't. There's not a lot of like technical talks about it because it's kind of there's not much else to say about it.
I mean, like on the wayside, like when I'm doing like a map or like when I'm mapping something in Unreal, I don't even think about it. And I just put the lights in place, and then the engine does like it in the background or something. Or
well, I've seen a lot of talks from like I think Dice or whoever made like one of the Star Wars games on like on the.
Oh, you mean the technical talk about Frostbite engine?
I don't know one like that kind of stuff. I've seen a lot of. I think a lot of AAA studios are still using approaches like that, and it doesn't sell graphics cards, and it doesn't impress people. Like it's not something that like it's not an impressive technical subject, but I think it's actually being used quite a lot.
Hey, I'm gonna pull something up here.
Yeah,
Not stream. Give me a minute. I'm gonna pull something up in the Unreal Editor because I'm curious now to see what it does when I set up like a dynamic light scene that's supposed to use their nanite system and their form of ray tracing. Let me see what this says.
Well, I just know as like a map designer, I like light baking because I can get the results I want. And
so they actually do use light maps, but it's a pre-computed what is this called? Light mass is what it is.
Yeah, so they're trying to make it sound a lot of times.
Just as
especially with like tone mapping, people like to invent like very fancy terms because it sounds sophisticated.
Bullshit you a bunch of smart
Oh,
talk.
this is you're right.
Yeah,
I'm looking at
a lot of smart talk.
Yeah, I'm looking at the editor right now, and for the light mapping, which is the light mask, they actually show you the interaction in the scene, and it's pre-computed before you render. And then if you change the light for the Unreal Engine, the light is updated in almost real time. It's about a 30-40 millisecond update, and that's hardware dependent, and it recomputes the scene.
Yeah,
So you're correct, Josh. I did not know that. So
I can't
I guess
find
I'm learning
the
something.
exact thing that the exact presentation I was. This might actually be it.
If you're talking about the Star Wars one, that's the only thing I know about them was the Frostbite engine, where they ran into a lot of technical issues and they had to use a lot of pre-computed lighting for it. Like the stuff you're pulling up with the Endor scenes, the vegetation, they had to do a lot of like gutting the engine and rewriting it. And there's the photogrammetry. Yeah, this is the presentation I'm thinking of.
Let's see.
It's interesting because I did not know that these modern engines were still using pretty much the same stuff we've been using for the last 15, 20 years, just about.
Yeah,
It seemed like it seems like what they've done is and maybe you can correct me on this. It seems like with Unreal, because I'm looking at the Unreal 5 editor right now, and as I move a light around the environment in my project, it it updates and there's this little hiccup every time, and it's a CPU spike and then the GPU spikes up and then it recomputes.
sounds like
But
it's
as it
partially
like
updating
like a
part of
light
the
map.
light map. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of cool. I never really noticed that until you pointed it out.
Yeah, I
I
didn't
feel
know
like
that. I
I've
didn't
I
know
feel
that
like
they
I'm
were doing that, but
I feel like I'm behind on a lot of this, and yet a lot of the information, like Reap can tell you, my main background is like Unreal 3, Unreal 4, and then Source Engine and all that. And I'm looking at some of the things you're pointing out, and I do think, yeah, you're correct. You could very easily, I think you could, well, maybe that's what they were doing with Unreal 5, repurposing these older systems, but because our GPUs are much faster, we have more memory, we can load things in and we can kind of BS, as Reap put it.
Oh, when we see the terrain, and we talked about, like, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, can you make it possible that we can define terrain sizes in the options? So at the moment they are currently like
When you say terrain sizes, what do you mean?
the size for the terrain,
like the scale.
the scale. Yeah.
The scale? Okay.
Yes, I just want to go very carefully with that stuff because it's very hard to keep the vegetation like lined up very precisely. We have it like perfect now, so now I think we can move on and start adding like a horizontal scaling factor. I think that would be okay to do.
I have a bit of a semi-important question for you, Josh, on this. Um, from all this information that you've provided me, and I'm trying to review things and understand where I'm coming from. You said now you're able to import at least semi-directly from Unity project files, and then
Yeah.
you just have to invert the y-axis.
Yeah. I just have like some scripts that basically automate that process.
And is that going to be so? I don't have, as you know, I don't have access to your engine or anything yet. But let's say in 6 months or something, I get a license and I'm playing with your engine. So I have tools that allow me to export. This actually simplifies some of the questions I asked you earlier. So I have tools that I can convert from Unreal 5 to Unity without really any issue. It automatically does all the adjustments. So what it sounds like then is, and I guess the question I'd ask you is, let's say 6 months down the line, I get a license for Ultra Engine. So in the editor for Ultra Engine, from the sound of everything you've covered today, let me know if this sounds reasonable or if I'm missing a detail or if you can clarify it. Let's say I export from Unreal and I simplify the meshes and I bring it down into Unity, and then I turn that into a Unity project file, and I have all the textures, I have all the original models, you name it. I can just import that then, not completely issue free because I know how this works, but I'd be able to implement the Unity file and then make the adjustments in Ultra Engine without
You know,
too much of an issue.
there's probably an easier pathway just to go straight from Unreal to Ultra. I haven't looked at it in too much
I'd
detail.
have to do well. From what I've talked with Reap about on it, it looks like I'd have to, and I don't have the skills nor the means. Maybe I could set up some sort of LLM or something that would help me modify things, because when I've converted from Unreal, the big problem that I've noticed is the nanite system. And to get out of the nanite system, once you're already in it, is you have to basically break the model into a very simplistic form, and then you have to create LOD models out of that as you migrate that work to something else. So I don't know how I would migrate my files from Unreal to Ultra or any other engine. In Unity, there's a direct conversion. There's a few apps that help me do that, and I only use Unity as a comparative sense for like lighting and everything else. So when you said that, you kind of perked my ears up, because I'm sitting there thinking, I don't like Unreal Engine, I don't like Epic Games, and I'm looking more in the future. And most of this is just experimentation. That's why I'm not streaming. And there's also some other stuff where I'm working on projects. So I'm kind of trying to figure out if I know it's your product, and to be honest, I kind of want to jump to your product because I like your engine. I like what you've shown. So my questions mostly are, if you were to, let's say, from what I've described, hypothesize, and I were to migrate into Unity and then use Unity as like the stepping stone into Ultra Engine, would you think
are we
that's
talking about 3D models, or are we talking about the complete scene?
the full scene?
Okay.
It's the vertices, everything within the scene, the like the lighting, the layout. Like, so when you say that, would that actually import, or is there some pathway I'd have to modify? Like, I'm just trying to get a rough ideas. I mean, I can reset up, lighting with a skybox or anything else. That's not a big issue. I'm just trying to get a picture of what you meant when you said like an individual could import from Unity.
All I know, I've only tested it on one scene.
And does that include like spotlights? Is that like an area light? Like when you say one scene, or is that just the
And
models?
I'm just trying to get the 3D models. There's a tool that exports it into a JSON file, and I was able to. That contains the orientations of each object. By the way, everything in Unity, the Y and the Z axes are swapped.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I have a tool from Unreal to Unity that does that for me, and it is a JSON file. That's why I'm trying to figure. I was wondering, like, with is it your conversion, or did you just like look at how the orientations are and then you're like, okay, I can implement this? Or
what do you mean?
Like, when you import and you know how to flip, let's say, the vertices of, say, a model, where a model's orientation in the scene is going to be where the Z points to 1, but you need to flip it to, say, like a -2 or some angle like that. You already have that done from the sound of it. But when I talk about
everything here, these objects are all the original orientation that they appear.
You said earlier the green color was, what was it? The something with the face, or what was
one
it?
of the scale is inverted on one of the axes.
When you say the scale, is that like where they would like pinch the model down, or
it's using a negative number for the scale?
Oh, that's a Unity thing.
Which flips the faces around. I think they did it that way. Like, I think that's kind of a legacy thing, because if you're not rendering things in batches, then that doesn't really matter, because you're just rendering one object at a time. But if you're doing things in batches, I mean, it's not impossible to deal with, but it creates a lot of complication. I don't think it's that valuable.
In my conversions, and maybe this probably doesn't mean much, but in my conversions with Unreal to Unity, I just ignore that, and then I just say go with default value, and then it just turns it from a negative to a positive. And then if there's an issue, I just go in and edit it in a batch by selecting all the objects.
Yeah, my first attempt, I used the absolute value of the scale, and
What did you do?
that's
Break the
that's
face of the model or something,
what's
or
that?
did you break the face of the model, or did it like not render, or?
Well, if the scale is inverted, then the object is inside out. All the faces face the wrong way.
Well, when you say face the wrong way, do you mean like rendering face the wrong way, where like
Yeah.
it's improperly lit, or like actually like spiking out with artifacts?
The faces will be flipped in the wrong direction, and I'm not sure if the normals will probably be flipped as well.
And the conversion I use with Unreal is I just flip the normals when it gives me that error, and generally that works. But other times you do get some mesh errors.
Well,
That
you
might be
don't. I
something
mean,
to consider.
I think you like that's stored in the mesh. You can either like change the geometry of the mesh, or you can have a setting, saying which direction, what the windedness of the triangles is going to be. But I chose to just sidestep all of those problems. Now, if the object's origin is in its exact center, then you can just use the absolute value of the scale usually, and it's no problem.
Yeah.
With some of these, like their origin is sort of at the top, and so when you make when you make the scale positive on all axes, then the object actually moves, and so that's why I marked them in bright green. There's not very many of them, so it wasn't used very
Yeah,
much.
I was gonna say it's not a big issue. I was just more curious as to what the methodology of how you are converting, and it seems like you do have solutions for this, and it's more of a
Well,
like
this was all
thing.
worked out like just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
But it's not too. I don't think it's. I don't think it's. I have something that's going to work 100% of the time. But I was able to
That's
get
not
this.
well. That's not possible
Yeah.
anyway. You can't get 100%. You can get close, but I'm actually no. This is making a lot more sense. So basically, I am considering with some of my projects. Then, I mean, the only thing I'd be sacrificing is what we discussed earlier, where I mentioned the nanite system. And to be honest, I don't like it. And your engine seems to be very, very, very capable of doing exactly what I need to do or what I want to do. And from what you've covered with the new vegetation system, everything, which is what I was really curious about, is that solves a lot of the problems with instancing and procedural generation that I had asked you about previously. So this is interesting. It's something I need to play with eventually in the future, which of course right now, as I said, I've migrated most of my projects from Unreal into Unity, and I guess now you've made it easier for someone like me to take what I have from Unity, which is simplified, and move it into Ultra Engine. Nice.
Well, in
So-
6 months, I think we'll have probably less than 6 months, hopefully.
I'm
C#
talking in the next half year, so
Yeah,
yeah.
we'll have C# support, and we'll certainly have a demo.
I actually just
available
messaged
then.
Reeve about that. When Andy here was talking about something, I said this reminds me of a handler event in C sharp, and I asked Reeve, and he said, "I don't know." He's like, "It sounds like it," and I said, "That sounds like a C sharp issue." That I don't know. Did I ever ask you about C sharp or no, or is that something you? Because I do have some C sharp experience. Mostly it's Lua and C++ and GLSL. So I'm interested in all of this because it seems like, and you can correct me on this, it seems like you're trying to implement a lot of like remove the barriers of entry for people to be able to use the engine in the way they need to use it. And I do appreciate that a lot. I don't know, are you fluent in C sharp at all, or
Me?
yeah.
Oh, I mean, not really, but I mean, if you know C++, it's not much different. It's basically it's almost like a
Similar.
subset of C++, almost.
I found it for me. I've worked with C sharp better than I have with C++, just like I have with Lua. And your engine has Lua support, right? I know Leadworks did, and
Yeah, we use Lua a lot.
Which can I ask which version of Lua is it?
The latest, I think it's 5.4.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with that. I've done a lot with old school Gmod, and then I abandoned that as I learned more recent Lua. So nice. Okay, so it should give me a path then to migrate my project files. I appreciate the answers, by the way. I'm just trying to figure things out.
Back to the terrain. I think we talk. Or you mean something different. I mean the list which I posted into the chat here. If it's possible to.
I see a picture of a
Not the snake. The picture above.
Jar Jar snake.
The picture above. So you have predefined resolutions, and maybe the possibility to add some custom resolutions would be good. If you, for example,
For
need
like
a really big terrain,
non-square.
not non-square. If you need, for
Oh.
example, a 60K terrain or something. So if you want to go bigger,
Let's see what that memory would be. 16384 times 16384 times 2 divided 1024 kilobytes, megabytes. Okay, 512 megabytes. That's not too bad. Yeah, we could we could support 16384.
Well, I would. I'm gonna interject there just to say what you should do, and I know this is gonna sound extremely stupid, but in previous projects of mine, I just put it as unlimited. I let a user define it. But what you should do is somewhere in that code, you should just simply say if you exceed like some stupid variable, you just say, hey, if you do that, you're gonna run out of memory, and that's it. And you let the user do it.
I try to. I'm careful to avoid things like
I know,
that.
because people will file complaints and they'll file bug reports, but in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking like, I like it when I give like end users more control than I think most users would ever use. And if you go outside of like a squared value, and of course, like you could push. I mean, again, I have a 4090, and I'm thinking from like a terrain variable from the calculations you've done. Yeah, I could do 16K or 24K, and I'd be hitting like 22 gigs. Like my GPU would not max out on memory. Of course, that's not the average
The
user.
programming API tends to be more permissive. It doesn't really have checks, but when you have a visual editor, you need to have reasonable limitations for stuff like that.
You could do what one of the things we did before, like my old group did, where we just added a checkbox where it was like, hey, check this box if you want to exceed the limits, and then you need to understand the risks, and that's it. Like that might be something you don't, and I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying that might be something to consider, because that will give the end user who's like developing something more control over, say, like the terrain and what's generated and how they manage the memory in the system and what's being rendered.
Do we really want to design for the edge cases? Speaking of,
I'm of the view that you should develop for the edge cases, but of course, Reap can tell you I'm the kind of person who breaks everything and pushes things beyond the edge. But
yeah. By the way, guys, your reviews on Steam are very much appreciated. I keep forgetting to mention this. I want to like open with this and close each meeting with this. But definitely can use your reviews on Steam. So if you're very pleased with the direction things are going in, that's something that you might want to do.
I think I got one already, pretty early.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of people have already written them. But...
Oh, it's from Christmas last year.
Yeah, I was on the first few too. I did it on the standard version because I thought that was going to be the most popular, but it seems that a lot of people are buying Pro over the standard version.
Yeah, that's funny, isn't it?
I was gonna ask about the Pro version. Like, what is your exact like? I wasn't sure about the exact benefits of Pro. Like
C++ support.
That's it.
Yeah. So in Leadworks, it was done. The base product was Lua only, and then there was a DLC for C++ support. And I'd say like only about 10%, maybe 20%. I'd have to go back and check, but it was something like that. Most people were just using the standard version without the Pro DLC.
Yeah.
However, with
But what would okay? I have one question there before you go with that. What would stop me from just loading a module that's like bootloaded through Lua as like a C++ package?
oh, you can. Yeah, Lua supports that kind of stuff.
I know it does. I'm just saying, like, so these users do you, what again? It's like in that case, then if the differentiation is just this package says C++, well, I could just load a module straight through
But
Lua.
you got native, so you got native to support for C++ without making any fancy stuff.
It provides the C++ library and headers
Okay.
files so you can program and like the project template so you can program with Visual Studio.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to like say I'm gonna bypass anything or anything. I'm just like,
Well, if you want to write your own binding code for the entire API,
it just
good luck to
that's
you.
a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I've done that before. I know exactly how much of a pain in the ass that. I'm just curious.
But what's kind of interesting is the most people who bought Leadworks just had the standard version, but with Ultra, the behavior is different. Like the Pro version is much more popular than the standard version, so that might just be because it's early access, and so right now it's more the more like hardcore enthusiasts are the ones who are using it right now. But it's kind of interesting.
Well, I have it all on my wish list, and I can't write you a review obviously since I don't have a license. I will say these discussions, and for the few times I've been here and looked at what you're working on, I'm very appreciative of the discussion, and I've learned a lot from you. And I do, when I've gone through the reviews, I do rate all of them up as best I can. So I do enjoy this stuff, Josh. So I hope you know, as an outsider, I find this to be a very interesting, if not engaging, enthralling engine that you're developing.
Well, let's. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I asked Marcel to come in here. I don't know. We can talk to him.
I was hoping he would come in because I know Reap had messaged me and then we were talking about it, and he was the one who did the view model and stuff you were showing, right?
Yeah.
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 I think he's camera shy.
I had a couple questions. I had a couple questions for him, but
Hey, Marcel.
wait, did he come? Oh, he's here. Okay.
He's the blue guy.
The blue guy.
What's up, man?
I'm working on a rig for the view model.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
I'll
Reap.
show-
Oops, sorry. No, Reap. I'm not going to ask him any questions right now.
Yeah, we talked about view models for about 45 minutes. Trash can useful. Hello.
This is pain.
Oh no, he's doing the skeleton. Oh god. He's doing what I was telling you about, where you have to stretch it out to each finger and all that other nonsense. From like, I hated rigging, but it's when it works, and it's a beautiful thing.
My mouse doesn't want to work. Okay, it's good.
Oh, the thumb joints are probably one of the worst ones. Once you get that done, you could just clone it into all the other fingers.
This honestly doesn't look that bad.
But once you have the initial skeleton set, then it's not so bad. It's when you start rigging, and then especially when you apply like an animation to it or you're trying to animate it, then you have to do there's this whole recording process with it. I hated it. But I can do it. I know how to do it. I learned how to do it because of Source Engine.
So
Oh, that's funny.
Marcel, yeah, I think the big question that I know I have, and I think everybody probably is, we're very eager to see what this looks like once we get everything in the right orientation. Because we were talking for quite a long time, actually, about just like it's hard to. It's easy for something to look wrong once you get into the final orientation. I mean, the model looks very good to me. The proportions and everything look.
I think
look
they're
very nice.
exceptional,
Very nice.
dude. They look great. This is a fantastic model.
Thank you.
And we certainly appreciate
I
you volunteering your time on this.
I want to ask you actually, Marcel. I'm watching you rig this. So for the bone joints, I didn't do this when I would rig for Source Engine and stuff. Can I ask why you're bringing the points of the bone all the way to the tip of the model, like the edge of the like the very edge of the model? Is there like, or is that just where from the way you rig that it works the best for your case? Or
Well, it's actually not necessary, but so why not? I don't know why not. It's just more visible. There's no reason to do it. You can have it like this.
I know. I was wondering because when I've done like finger rigging, I always like pull it back by like a couple millimeters from like the tip. It's not. It doesn't really do much more. It just for me it always. Well, again, I was working with like Source Engine and stuff. It always gave me like a finer range to work with. I guess.
I think it's probably the same reason. Like I enjoy going through and removing all the invisible faces in rape maps. It's just that OCD, like attention to detail. It's just fun.
This right here, this right here, Josh, is what I was telling you about. Once you rig the thumb and then you rig the index finger, you could just copy over and then resize the skeleton to each finger. It doesn't seem like much work, but it actually kind of sucks because you have to sit there and you have to align to each of the joints of the model. He's actually really good at aligning those joints from the random angles. But really, you mostly have to just keep rotating it, and then you have to get it centered within the model, and then the model will be set up to the joints.
Rigging in Blender is pain. If I would rig, I would use Maya.
See, there you go. I like this is what I was telling you about, Josh. What I would have done is I would have just rigged the thumb and the index, and then I would have just copied it over and then centered it and sent you the file and been like, send this to Marcel or send this to whoever's running it. I don't care. Here you go. The problem that I always ran into when I was rigging is exactly what we're watching, where you need to get all the joints right in place. And of course, the funny thing is, it doesn't look like much, but then when you do the animation sets, sometimes the animations don't align with the bones, and then you have to kind of go back and you got to look and say, okay, the animation is making this joint jut up here or do this, and you got to go in and like readjust. And never been a big fan of it. Of course, when I've made custom animations in the past, then it's a little different because then you get to define the animation set. But that takes a lot more time than the rigging aspect of the mesh. There's an artistry to it, and I've been trying to get an AI model to rig and do 3D stuff for me, but it's a bit difficult because I don't have enough VRAM, as I keep running into.
Oh, we've got a better AI model right here.
Is that Marcel?
His name is
the AI?
Marcel.
I mean, he's pretty good.
Meshbot
He's
2000.
better than me.
Think about that. We have a bone where we can attach the weapon to it.
I do like where he's got the wrist placement, even though it's a little more forward than the actual wrist, but the stretching, the deformation of the mesh is going to be perfect on that. Like this is a skilled guy. I don't know Marcel. I don't think I've ever talked with Marcel, but he did. Oh, you shrug it down and you move it. No, don't move it. If you move it forward, well, actually, no. Now you got a joint in the hand. This guy's good. He's real good.
And for the weapon, right? So
I don't even have a comment now on any of this because he actually just made his job later easier for attachment points. Mm-hmm. Where do you find these people, Josh? Good people, like insanely talented.
I don't know. They just show up on the forum.
Reap, he makes Snood look pathetic.
Snood is lazy.
Snood's lazy, but I mean, come on, like, look at how single comment, and then he just immediately adjusted to it in a second. That's now he can just mirror it to the other side. He's working in Blender right now. It looks like, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that is.
Have you saved your work, Marcel?
I hope so.
We've been.
Wow. I'll tell you what, Josh. Every time I come in here, I mean, for the few times, I'm always blown away by how inferior I feel, and yet at the same time, it's like I can see stuff like this, and I know how to do it. But this would take me 45 minutes to an hour or more while I fret over each of the joints and each of the bones, and
Yeah.
wow.
You know, every weekend we have something like. I usually do minimal planning for these, and we oftentimes end up with something really interesting that I was not counting on at all. And this is another one of those situations. I'm about ready for lunch, so I'm going
Yeah.
to stop
It's
recording the
Hey, it's
video.
getting late for you. Yeah.
No, it's like 12 o'clock
It's
here.
like 12 p.m., right?
Yeah, 12:40. But once again, thank you all for joining. And I will see you on the forum, and you can stick around in the and watch Marcel rig things as long as you want.
Josh,
Yeah.
I just
sorry
want to
for
say,
interrupting, but before you go, I
Yeah.
just want to tell you something when the record is over.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
I just want to say, since you're heading off, Josh, I appreciate you letting me back here, and I'm every time I talk with you, all I do is learn stuff from you and Reap, and thanks for bringing me back here, man. I'm very appreciative of you. I consider you a friend. I hope you know that. You're a good guy.
Aw, shucks. All right. Oh yeah. Once again, your reviews on Steam. I'm gonna start opening and closing with that. Are very much appreciated. So have a good week, and I will see you on our website. Stop.